Good evening to the Auburn Comprehensive Planning Committee meeting. My apologies for being a little late. I ran from one meeting to the other and to get here. So we can start by a roll call, so identify who is here. Dennis, want to start in?
Hi, Dennis Bergeron.
Hi, Matt Duval.
Jeff Harmon.
John Cleveland.
Dana Staples.
Paul Jacques.
Bilal Hussein.
Becky Conrad.
Jane Coslow.
Phil Kroll.
Dennis Dote.
Okay. And I did,
Allie Toby, very done.
and I did get a text message from Tim Cowan. His job has called him in this evening. He's urgent matters. So when your boss says there are urgent matters, you show up. And he apologizes for not being able to be here. We have minutes of a previous meeting. Anyone has any changes or comments?
Motion to approve.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Minutes are adopted. The next item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment. So I'll open the opportunity for any member from the public who would like to make comments or address the Comprehensive Plan Committee for a few minutes.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. I just have one comment based on the review that you did at the last meeting of the various high-density, middle-density, and low-density areas within the city, and looking at certain specific areas and attempting to characterize them one way or the other. And it occurs to me that there is one particular neighborhood within the city that I would characterize as a high-risk neighborhood from the point of view of building structures and land use. And I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this, but it's the Laurel Avenue, Newbury area. That's an area that was built largely between 1870 and 1920 with the current body of houses replacing earlier buildings on what was originally an Anassanundacook Indian village. And the buildings, when they were built to be big buildings. They were prosperous people's houses, and they were well built for the time, and they've got lots of ornate features to them, Corinthian columns holding up the porches, and big sun rooms, wooden sun rooms with lots of glass in them. And over the last 70 or 80 years, they've taken a real pounding. Almost all of them have been cut up into smaller and smaller units. There's very limited parking on the street, and the yards are just jammed with vehicles. And if you had to identify one area that looks like it could be a prospect for just continuing decline, to put it bluntly, I would focus on that and try to develop some strategies for propping up, preserving, and improving that neighborhood. When I was growing up in the city, I had a lot of friends who lived on Laurel Avenue and some on Newbury Street. There were nice residential neighborhood, but that's long in the past. So I urge you to give some special attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beal. Noting that there are no other members of the public here, I'll close the public comment section. And for the record, I would just note that Kelly Butler has joined the Comprehensive Plan Committee. That brings us up to item 4, finalize a draft of land use categories. Finalize a draft of the land use categories. So, I think there was some changes from our last meeting just on the 19th. And so I'll turn it over to you, Ally, to walk us through those.
Great. I'll start with just a handful of changes to the growth area boundaries. up in this area, per discussion, towards the city's northern edge, changed a handful of areas back to moderate growth based on the residential characteristics that are there. And then updated, 2 areas that we examined last time. So removing these 4 parcels over here from kind of that uncertain to low growth, and then eliminated that floating green area down here as well. And then looking at changes to the land use categories, added in some high density cores per our discussion last time. So focusing on the Auburn Mall area, Great Falls Plaza, and then the exit 75 interchange down here. And then adjusted the downtown border slightly to move into the northern end of New Auburn. And then any other modifications there were just adjustments to boundary lines to allow for those cores. And then adjustment in the northern end here to remove these 3 areas from kind of the ag and open space category into the residential corridor category.
Any questions about those? Dan?
Yeah, we still have that one parcel north of the airport that's, I don't know, red-green for the lack of a better word. Do we need to kind of settle on what we're going to do with that? I think after the gentleman who was here last meeting, I think it makes a lot of sense to keep it in a place where it can be ag. But I don't know if there's any other thoughts about that.
Yeah.
I would suggest that the committee leave it in the current state that it is for a little bit longer. Lauren's still on vacation. She has meetings set up with the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, and with Maine Farmland Trust, and then with the Field family, basically to have the discussion about where they see that's going long-term and whether it makes more sense to leave it as ag, or whether it would be a different classification with a Title VII protection. So I would suggest it's going to go one way or another, I think, from the discussion that the group has had up to this point, and we circle back after those meetings have happened and see what update Lauren can give us.
Is that okay with you, Dana? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. If there's going to be an easement on that property, it doesn't necessarily matter so much where it's zoned.
And then in your packets, there were a handful of edits to the descriptions as well. We added those, just the track changed versions, so that all of you could see what changes were made there. A handful of language updates here and there, and then the addition of the high density core descriptions.
Dana?
Allie, I guess I wasn't really sure how to find the track change comments. Is that inside the story map, or is that somewhat?
No, that was in the PDF of the packet
Okay.
that was shared.
Yep.
We don't have a way to do track changes in story maps, so added in the PDF there.
Any other questions or comments on the land use categories? Bella?
So yeah, I've kind of missed a couple meetings, but so was the intention with these the red zones as we see on the map to like have that classification just for that area to be high growth, or are we going to still have the high growth but also in addition to these areas? If that makes sense.
So the intent is to maintain this high growth boundary as it is, and with the land use categories are looking at just adding another layer of definition or vision for different areas within that high growth area. Added in those kind of high density cores of locations that might be or what could be the highest density of development in the future, kind of focusing on those key cores or those key sectors to be able to support either redevelopment or enhanced kind of future development within kind of key sectors or key areas.
Yeah, thank you. Because I just, because we were originally looking at maps that had the red, the yellow, and the green, and then just seeing the red limited to those areas had, was cause for concern. So, thank you.
Jeff?
So Ally, could you zoom in a little on the exit 75 just to the southeast? Go a little center that where you are now. Yep, drag it up. So just to the southeast of the red, where the strip zone is. So my recollection of the prior conversations was that the large lot right there on the red, go up right there, that was going to be split in the middle, and only the west side half of that lot would be in the high growth, and the other would be in a different category. And I went back and looked at my notes, and the lot below that, which is now green, so my notes were that would be more like what the strip zone is, the eastern half of the lot you're pointing at, and the one just below it, to the southwest of it, that's where Morin Bricks extraction pits are. And I thought the prior discussion was that was going to be the same. So there'd be a transition like there is on the other side of the road. It might not be that mustard color, it might be the brownish color. But we see what the group thinks about the Morin lot area that's in the green, but the red one where the old Route 26 cuts across, I think the eastern half of that shouldn't be red. Thought that would get a conversation going amongst the group.
Do others have similar recollection of that, or? Yeah, Becky?
I don't have specific recollection on this spot, but I do know we gave an awful lot of comments about not splitting properties in half. So is that maybe what happened?
I think the edit that we made is that this is kind of one parcel that has an L here, and we identified these handful of lots to be moderate growth, and we just extended that line across the edge of this parcel here. But if there's kind of committee desire to increase that, I think we can do that. Just want to make sure that we're understanding kind of the committee's direction on what makes sense here.
Yeah.
My recollection actually matches Mayor Herman's, that we did agree to move that and cut off some of that, the way he's describing.
So would the line from the green just extend? Is that what or is the line from the strip zone?
Well, we could draw the line any place there, but just theoretically, where the corner of the green is now on Moose Brook Road, right there, just draw that straight across to where that funky looking piece that's set aside, the turnpike owns, because that's where Route 26 used to come. So if you went from that green corner over to where Route 26 was, yeah, something like that, and cut it off there. I mean, the line can be any place in there. I think the group's discussion earlier was to have more of a transition going that way to the east.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would fit the the development pattern that we're seeing there. I was out there this weekend, and I mean, it's a big field. I mean, it makes sense.
So this would be moderate growth split. So this front part along Washington Street would be high growth, and then this back half would be more of a moderate growth in line with, I think, our neighborhood transition land use category.
At the pleasure of the committee?
That makes a lot of sense to me. It is coming back to me that we had that, once you mentioned the turnpike part of it, I'm like, oh yeah.
I remember that. Jeff, I don't remember the more and brick part of it as well. Can you go through that again?
Yeah, so where the green is now, in my notes, I had this as an unresolved parcel, right? Because the discussion, when I went back and looked at this, you zoom out just a little bit, Ally. The concern that I had noted that the committee was talking about was the southeast end of that lot borders Moose Brook. And there was some concern about whether that parcel should be in the low growth zone or the medium growth zone because of that. And then the other side of the discussion was, well, it's basically being used for industrial use today. So I just don't, I think it's either way is fine, but we have this, what in effect was a strip zone that comes down there. If you could put it in medium growth, and it would be a transition from what's red now into that tan, or if we're really concerned about the brook, I mean, we'll still have shoreland zoning there, then we could leave it in the low growth. But I don't, I'm not saying there was an answer to that, because in my notes, it was that we hadn't resolved what we were going to do with that piece.
I think I was guilty for raising the Moose Brook thing. And you say that it's a shoreland zoning overlay that which should protect it.
Well, I mean, that's I guess for the purposes of the comp plan committee, I would say yes. I think there's some questions when this process is over and we're into zoning, because in effect, we have two differential shoreland zoning protections, right? Because in some places where it's the form-based codes, it was reduced to 75 feet, but it's more in other places. And so I think that'll have to be resolved later, but fundamentally, one would assume that the shoreland zoning setback is enough to protect the brook.
I understand that streams were usually 75 feet, though, that in the larger bodies of water were more than that.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up, John. Paul will remember this.
Yeah.
Just a year or so ago, when, maybe it's a couple of years ago now, when they were doing the issue at Brickyard Circle, members of the planning board raised the question that one of the buildings was encroaching in the shoreland zoning ordinance, and everybody on the planning board looked at the plan and says, yes, you're right, and the applicant pointed out that no longer was it that in that zone, it had been decreased to 75 feet, so in effect, the building actually wasn't in the zone. So someplace along the line, there was some change there that amended the shoreland buffer in the form-based code districts.
All right. Rick?
I was just going to say, it seems like I recall issues around Moose Brook and Royal River. I don't know if it runs into the Royal River, but we've had complaints from the Royal River whatever club or something on other issues related to development. So we got to at least be mindful of that. But I do think there's shoreland zoning protections, and if it's downzoned a little bit, compared to the other side of the lot, so much the better on that issue.
So what is the pleasure of the members of, we want that in a transition zone, that square? Anybody opposed to that idea? Well, looks like transition zone is okay.
Just to clarify, we're talking about this parcel, not these in green, correct? Okay.
Yes, I think that's correct.
So I would assume it'd be something like whatever, remind us what the brown is there.
That's the neighborhood transition, so lower,
Yeah, so
moderate
from
density
a,
neighborhood.
so from a land use characteristic standpoint, it would probably be the same as that. And Ally, that's medium growth, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Ally, I could use some help trying to differentiate. I think it's what's called high-density residential that is near around the core.
Is it
Can you
this?
make that a little bigger? My little eyes don't see that. Yeah, that is sort of what would you call that, kind of a tan color or something, beige color, which covers quite a bit. And I think if I remember correctly, the characteristics talk about 4-story apartment buildings, and is one of the characteristics in that zone, that land use characteristics.
Yes.
So when I'm thinking about this, it seems as though that there's quite a bit of differentiation currently with the list there. If I look in the New Auburn area, you know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th Street, something like that. Down towards the Cinecore, there's a lot more 3, 4-story buildings there, on pretty densely located. But to me, that looks a little different than if you get over to the other side of town where you're looking at stuff between Gamage Avenue and Lake Street and up around the Lake Street neighborhood. Those are more 2 or 2.5-story kind of buildings. And I could see other differentiations there, but I won't point them all out. So what I'm wondering is if they all stay, that include these larger buildings, does that impede, or does that make it suggest that all of that area could have 4-story buildings in it? If the zoning, when the zoning comes around and they looked at the guidance, would that suggest to them that we should be having 4-story buildings in all of that zone? Jeff?
So that, today, that is 3.5 stories. It's that's all zone 3 stories with an attic, and the attic can be converted to, can be used as a 4th floor, and in that zone, if it's affordable housing, you can add another story on top of that. So today, you can have up to 4.5-story buildings in those neighborhoods. Now, lots of the buildings there aren't. There are some 3 stories, so I don't think it presumes that everything that's built there has to be that. That would be the limitation that would be allowed there.
Well, I appreciate that current zoning may be that way, which is a more recent change in the last several years as opposed to being long-term. Which I'm not sure that that's necessarily the way that other groups might want to see the zoning in there. I'm just thinking there ought to be some clarity on the choice in those areas based on their historic style of development. I guess that's, I haven't resolved in my mind that that gives clarity in regards to what the characteristics would be going forward in areas that I see as quite different in some areas. I don't have an immediate answer to that of another type of zone, but I see it as something I haven't resolved in my mind yet. Jeff?
So Ally, remind us, this is in a growth area, and this mixed-use neighborhood is the transition between downtown and compact residential, right?
Correct.
You have downtown as a core area, you've moved out, and this is between this and compact residential would then be what would border the medium growth area?
Yes. Intent with this is that there's a lot of kind of mixed use in these areas today, and when we look at that area and kind of existing lots and densities here, this is kind of more of the density that surrounds this core here. So thinking of this being that transition out from this really dense kind of urban core here into more of those kind of historically dense kind of urban style neighborhoods that have their own amenities there, to kind of accommodate a variety of different housing types or different kind of business uses or other things. Noted kind of fewer than 4 stories, kind of building on the different types of units, different types of buildings that exist today, knowing that based on kind of different characteristics, that fewer than 4 stories piece would allow for kind of a broad section of housing where that's appropriate with zoning.
Well, I'm not questioning the density, because I'm familiar that there are a number of smaller lots, and the residential structures are closer to one another. But there's a difference between being closer to one another and being 1 or 2 family, 2.5 type stories, where you have another characteristic where the buildings are 4 stories tall, and you could have way more than 4 units in those buildings. That's, to me, a little bit different style of density than just being close to one another. Now, I don't mean to say there couldn't be some, 2 apartments with another apartment up in the attic. That could happen. But it's a little different in my view than being 4 stories and having 8 or 12 units in them.
So this is currently under state law, this is 5,000 square foot. You cannot restrict it to less than 4 dwelling units. So we need to have a balance here, right? I understand, John, the point that you're making. What the committee's going to have to grapple with here is, as you move out from the core to the edge of the medium growth, out at that demarcation, the LD 2173 hasn't passed, but it's now come out with a majority report from the committee to change the minimum threshold at 10,000 square feet once you pass that demarcation into the medium zone. So what we're going to have to think about is, if we don't want, and I don't think any of us do, to say all the growth zone all looks the same, and what we want to see is some decrease in density and height of buildings as we go, we need to be a little bit careful about this, because what's happened over the last couple of years is these comp plans come in, the legislature has been reacting to these, and so I'm not saying this is what John's proposing, but let's say we said outside of the downtown, we're going to say, once you get past the downtown district, as we're moving out to medium density, you can't have more than 2 stories. The likely response is going to be legislation that stops all that, right? Because the policy that's trying to be effectuated across the state is to avoid sprawl, to have increased density over what is historically there now in these neighborhoods. So, you know, there could be, right now we have the 3 zones, it could be more than 3, but we need to think about that, and it's going to be very difficult to justify. We say we got downtown and then we're in, you know, 2-story buildings and 2 units. I don't think that's going to fly.
Well, no, but I'm not saying that you don't follow that you could put 4 units on 5,000 square feet, but there's different ways of doing that. And it doesn't prevent you, to get more units on there. That's just a minimum they're talking about. Can't be less than that. But there's different ways of achieving that. Some of that was achieved differently in the New Auburn area, because that was developed in the early 1900s when people congregated together and they needed to walk to the cotton mills and then later the shoe factory. So that sense of density made lots of sense to serve that population. As people migrated a little bit further away, automobiles became available. People built on smaller lots, but they built 2 families or maybe 3, maybe single family. So that is more characteristic of the way it was developed than the previous area that I just described. All I'm thinking about is a description in such a way that it doesn't preclude or it doesn't prescribe that the development has to be 4-story buildings.
I don't think it prescribes that. Well, I think what you're suggesting is a limitation that it's not allowed by changing the land use characteristics. Right? The way it's written now, as I understand it, Ally, correct me if I'm wrong here, it doesn't say the buildings have to be 4-story buildings. It could be a 1-story single-family ranch if that's what they want to build on the lot. But the characteristic written that way would say you can't have a 6-story building. I mean, we could change this to say in this zone it can be 2 stories or 3 stories, and if that's in the comp plan, when you get to zoning, that's going to be the cap on what you can build there.
Bruce?
The way we have it written up now, it says, you know, the area is characterized by homes and businesses with fewer than 4 stories. I think we've already addressed that. So there's fewer than 4 stories on smaller lots.
Mm-hmm.
That's the area that you're describing. So we're not going to have 4 stories.
Does that cover the New Auburn area too, Bruce? Yeah.
Everything in the mixed-use neighborhood, that's the way we've written it up.
But of course, as you know very well, there are 4-story buildings now. Well, what exists in the physical world may be 4 stories.
But the way we have it written up in a couple of places on information that we received from Ally today, you know, density informed areas characterized by homes and businesses with fewer than 4 stories on smaller lots.
No.
So, Ally, does that mean up to 3 stories or up to 4 stories? Because I read that as up to 4.
That's how we intended it to be, was up to 4. I think we can either take out reference to stories here and say characterized by homes and businesses on smaller lots, and the height can be a determination through the zoning process. Or we could specify 1 to 4 stories, 4 stories or fewer, and what language I think the committee wants to see represented here.
Well, I wanted to raise the issue now. I didn't anticipate that we would resolve it all this evening. I would be very interested to see.
John? Sorry, can I ask a quick question? With New Auburn, what part of New Auburn are you? Ally, if you zoom in on that.
Okay. So it's a little, well, that's a little further, well, do we know about what the street, can you identify some of the streets on the boundary? That would help. The light tan one. Which one are you referring to, Bruce? What goes? There are 2 different zones there.
The mixed-use corridor goes, from 2nd Street or 3rd Street up to Walton School, which is Mary Carroll Street.
Right.
Then over to Loring, and Loring is not part of it. Loring and Greenfield and those areas become the next part of it. So where you see the brown turning to greenish yellow, that's the Mary Carroll area.
Yes.
So it would seem to me, just like when we did the growth zones, there's a couple ways we should look at this. When we're talking about places like this on the margin, to me, the question is, where is the line drawn, not create another land use characteristic type, right? So in large part, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ally, a bunch of these lines for like mixed-use neighborhood, compact residential, the proposed lines were based on some existing zoning maps. And so they might not be in the right place, right? So like on this map where that green and brown boundary is, might get moved. I think we should look at that before we say, let's create yet another characteristic zone to apply.
All right. Well, I'll be interested in hearing on the input from the public. They may have some views on this, and I'll certainly take a closer look at it as well. Dennis?
2 things. Jeff suggested maybe drawing the line a little bit differently, and on the initial map that you were reacting to, John, I could see places where maybe I would draw the line a little bit differently to address your concern. And the other one is Ally's suggestion that you just kind of leave it for a down-the-road zoning exercise where you can get, you can paint with a finer brush and those kinds of exercises. So those are the two options that I think are most realistic. At this point, what you're doing is you're saying, let's just hear from the public. I think that's acceptable as well. You just want to put a pin in it and see how people react.
Yeah. Any other comments on Becky?
Well, I guess my only concern is that we don't have clarity at the committee level as to what fewer than 4 stories means, how many stories that is. Do we want to go out to the public with us not being clear what we mean?
Yeah.
And get reaction, or?
So-
I mean, I heard
so-
someone say it means 3 or few. Anyway,
Fewer than 4 stories means that 4 stories is out.
that's what I would think.
That's what the words mean.
That's what the words do mean, I think, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was my point, which is that's what was read, but that wasn't the prior discussion, which is why I asked Ally, what did they mean when they wrote that? The other thing we need to I'm not in favor of kicking the can down the road and saying, leave this to zoning. That is really dangerous, because now you're not creating a good linkage between your growth zones and your zoning, right? In this process, you want to have enough definition in these characteristics, so when the detailed zoning takes place, that this progression in decreasing density and building heights and setbacks, that you have enough in here so it's clear in these zones as you move out what the comp plan committee intended to happen, and that, because you don't know what's going to happen later on otherwise. So however, wherever we want to make the zones, I think that we should have some definition around these.
Yeah, that's one of the points I was making, is let's get more resolution in the comp plan level and not just push it into someone else who's doing the zoning to figure it out, you know?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to have buildings up to 4 stories. And the reason that I say that is when we did the public engagement process last spring, summer, whatever it was, what we heard over and over again was an issue of affordability. And if we're going to talk about building housing, any kind of housing, one way to make it a little bit more affordable is to build multi-units together. And apartment buildings create much more low-cost units than single-family homes. Not that you couldn't do it with a 3-story, but I think 4-story gives you the option to increase the density a little bit beyond what's existing in some of these areas, while preserving some of those needs to make things a little bit less expensive. So I think that's where I stand on that.
Jane?
Yeah, I really agree with you, Dana. I mean, I think a lot of Auburn and I think other parts of town in these orange sections are really characterized by very diverse levels and densities of houses as already. And that's quite frankly why I like them. And I don't think I don't think everybody's going to be marching in building 4-story houses. I have a greater concern, quite frankly, with the, with farther out and finding ways to maintain as much open space as we can. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really in favor of going ahead and allowing, 4 stories in these sections.
Okay, Alon?
Yeah, I'd just like to say ditto to what Jane and, sorry, I can't think of it, Dana said. Because I think if we look at Auburn's history historically, I mean, we're supposed to be, from previous comp plan to comp plan, we've started from the core and then worked our way out. And so if we're following that logic, I think it makes sense to have that downtown, have that high designated area of growth, and then the thing that borders it directly would be this mixed corridor, or mixed, I forgot the name of this, this area that we're talking about, the mixed-use developments. And so, and on a personal level, I mean, I do live in this area that's going to be zoned, or that's going to be used this way. And I can tell you, for example, when I was giving the feedback, I was having my neighborhood in mind, a neighborhood that has, duplexes, single-family homes, potential. There could be potential with this new comp plan for more multifamily developments, and where the heath goes around the corner and all the amenities that come with city life, And so I think, that's something that the public is really, really wanting for in terms of affordability, to ditto what Dana mentioned. So I think this is a good step to take that direction.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all your comments. It helps inform my view. And I'll be listening for input from the public as well. Anything else about the land use categories you want to discuss? Bruce?
So, if you move over to the next category, which is compact residential, you can allow 4-story there too. The way that one is written, this area is characterized by 1 to 4 family homes on medium to small lots. So are you doing it there as well?
Oh, Jeff, yep.
Yeah, so, well, it is a really good, important point that Bruce has raised here. So we need to be careful about these definitions because they're gonna inform what's gonna happen in zoning. So just in general terms, the way I think of this is when we move into this compact residential, you may here wanna say they're 2 stories because you could have a duplex, you can have a quad that's 2 stories, and the way you describe the interaction between the public and private realm, between the lot and the street, might be lots closer to the street activity and then when you cross over into medium growth and you're in that transitional zone, that could be 2 stories as well. You might say it's, you might have bigger setbacks, bigger separations from the buildings to get to Jane's vision here is if you're driving out from the core, it should be going like this, right? And they should be getting lower and they should be getting more spread out. So, to me, I think 2 stories in this compact residential zone would be okay because it doesn't preclude you from having a quad. It just means you can't have a tall quad. You could have, all together.
But in terms of neighborhood characters, it's a big difference because, compact residential borders on the one we just talked about, and so the transition has got to be kind of seamless. Mixed-use neighborhood, and then you go to compact residential, and when we were looking at the map, one was yellow and one was brown, and basically you have one side of the street as one and the other side of the street as another. So you're really maintaining the character of the neighborhood, and I think it makes sense.
And that's where I get back to once we firm up what we think these descriptions are, people should really look around the margins of these zones and say, is this the right place to put the line to have that type of a transition from one to another as you move out?
It sounds like people are like, the character of the neighborhood thing kind of, I'm a little apprehensive about that because things do need to change. If you're gonna have higher density, you need to allow this, even the older neighborhoods to grow differently. We want that density in the city area for people to not have to use a car. That's why we want it mixed use. And and honestly, having 4 stories, you end up having to put an elevator in anyway, so you might as well go to 5 or 6 if you're going to allow 4 stories with 4 or more units. And I can't see somebody building a 4-story building without having 4 units in it. So it's kind of teetering on the edge there. And what do you want to see there? If we have to shrink it to a different area that we allow, or allow it to just grow naturally. A lot of those homes are really old, and it might be beneficial to start with something different if that's what a developer wants to do.
Okay. Further discussion on the subject? Jane?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of following up on what Paul said, because I do agree with you, and I have a certain kind of uneasiness about being too invested in the way things have been. And I also feel myself, I have a feeling that builders and architects are in some ways the people to imagine what is going to be really good building for a place like Auburn in 20 or 25 years. And there might be really fabulous 4 or 5 story buildings that go out, on that road where I don't want to see any building, but it preserves, because it preserves open space, but it also allows people to live there. And so there's a part of me that wants to not be too restrictive. I mean, I understand we have to put some language in here, but we also want to leave leeway for the creativity and the possibility that builders might bring to us.
Okay.
Having a
Well,
younger child, or he's 23 now, can't buy anything, okay? And they don't necessarily want a big house or a single, they might want to live near the cities and share space with other people.
further comments? Belial?
Sticking with the compact residential, this is a different area of it. Might be a little nitpicky, but I noticed the definition for, so I'm looking at the first paragraph, the description paragraph. The second paragraph. So limited home-based businesses may be allowed. So I don't know what, we want to tailor that definition. No, actually, I had my question here, sorry. So my question was, are short-term rentals considered a home-based business? Because I think that would,
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
I said, are short-term rentals considered a
Oh.
home-based business?
I think our intent here was expanding access to things like in-home childcare or things like that. I think we can look at ways to be a little bit more specific here for that if there's a direction or desire from the committee with that description.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on Belial's point, short-term rentals are a real serious problem in certain parts of the state. Phil might remember, we looked at this a year or so ago, and there was very, very few, like less than 20 short-term rentals that, weren't a motel or had a bed and breakfast license or something in Auburn. I don't think that the comp plan is where you govern short-term rentals, right? It's the type of housing, and then there may be regulations. This is a challenge, coastal communities and lake communities have had. It's not about the type of housing there, it's about the use and whether there's going to be licensure for short-term rentals.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. Well, I'm pleased I generated the discussion. I think it was a good discussion to have. Apparently, I wasn't the only one kind of thinking about it, and I thought all of your comments were quite useful. Anything else before we move on? Anything else in land use characteristics that you want to discuss? Jeff?
Well, I would, since the new high-density, whatever we're calling them, cores that are on there in red, is like, it's like a proposed area. I think we should get some feeling from the committee whether they have concerns about that, not, whether they think that the areas, we didn't really discuss the particular boundaries of these at the last meeting, and so I think we should just loop through and make sure everybody's comfortable with these.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think at the last meeting, we were saying we ought to look at it a little more closely in the boundaries, and I know, Jeff, you provided some thoughts about that. Okay?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. I think my only concern, and I think somebody raised this last time with the exit 75 area, is whether we run the risk of that becoming another kind of downtown, because we heard the or working against any kind of revitalization of the downtown, because it sort of feeds into something that we heard in public comment about Auburn being basically a kind of bedroom community. So, yeah, that's a concern that I have.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for us to discuss. Just to play devil's advocate here, on the other side of that argument, I think, is opportunity loss. I think what we're trying to address here at Exit 75 is fundamentally a different demographic than what we're trying to handle downtown, right? There's lots of pressure from the greater Portland area now. Lots of developments happen to the west. Things are starting to push north. The turnpike's there. And the question is there an opportunity to capture more of a commuter population and provide not all the amenities you might get downtown, but with some mixed use in that area to support them? Because personally, I think if you just didn't do this, those people aren't coming to Auburn anyway, right? Because that's not what they're going to be looking for.
Becky?
Yeah, I think I probably was the one that, maybe Jane, you're referencing the connectivity, and I was thinking of it from the other perspective that, I mean, Auburn being such a huge landmass, by definition, means we're more than kind of one place for a lot of people. I would agree with Jeff that there is a wave happening, and this is our southern edge of the northern part of the wave. My connectivity comment was to drive folks who would choose that lifestyle, that kind of right off the turnpike commuter lifestyle, to connect them to us as their community versus everything we could in our power to connect them to us versus Falmouth as their recreation, their restaurants, their whatever. And that we can do through, and I think that would actually encourage the kinds of folks who might want to live in that area to be cyclists, to be, folks that would think about zipping downtown to go to dinner. So that's what I meant by connectivity.
Dana?
Yeah, based on the previous discussion that we had earlier, I think that one spot in the southeast of this, the high-density core, yeah, right where your cursor is, we probably should take that out of that place now that we've reduced the zoning there, or the land use.
I think where Ally's pointing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the eastern half of that is out based on a prior discussion. Is that what you got from that, Ally?
Yeah, I have a line right here to delineate, so we'll update that to match kind of the moderate growth. So this Washington Street frontage, and then this back half of this parcel that's fronting this area down here would be moderate.
To follow up on Becky's point, we had some discussion about this before. It's an important piece of this, and I think that we might want to have something in this description about connectivity, because the two major issues here are the multimodal connectivity, which, that will get partway down here soon, and then we have the Washington Street study, and the other part is the on-demand transportation. So in this description of these cores, we might want to have some language about that characteristic, having that type of multimodal connectivity as part of the characteristic for that area.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. Dennis?
Yeah, I think that if you don't encourage some development out there, you do foreclose the possibility of that kind of resident coming to Auburn. But I do also recall what Jane was saying about, we heard people talking about us becoming a bedroom community. And I was stunned when you go back to the inventory that we took of what's going on, and really there's only 600 people from Auburn a day that actually do their commuting to Cumberland County. So it's a perception that's out there, but right now it's actually not happening. So that's neither a for nor against. It's just a kind of every once in a while I go back to the inventory and I'm stunned by how many of the perceptions we have that aren't actually accurate.
Jeff?
Yeah, that's a good point. When you look at that, there's almost as many going to Augusta as there is to Portland. I think part of the reason for that is it's hard to get there, right? If you're up where Rick lives, no one's moving up there that's going to commute to Augusta to Portland because it takes you as long to get to the Turnpike as it does to get from the Turnpike to downtown Portland. So there's some geographical impediments of that. So I agree exactly with what you're saying, Dennis, and I think that's why some growth here would help capture that, because it allows the commuting with less pain, for lack of a better term, because you really got to, unless you're going to go up 202, if you're going any place to the south, you got to get to the Turnpike.
Yeah. Rick?
Going to say the history of Danville and comp plans was, in the old days, they were very much opposed to development down there. And I haven't seen that of the last, I don't think it was as heavy in 2010, and I haven't seen it this year. So I think people are just accustomed to the fact that there's been a lot of development there. They look at Augusta and see all the stuff around the Civic Center, and they see what Auburn could have done. I mean, if you go back to 1960s, we could have zoned that. I'm not sure it was good or bad. Now we have an Auburn Mall where there's opportunities for redevelopment, but it kind of, the development all went in that area around Center Street and Mount Auburn Avenue.
Lyle?
Thank you. To add on to that point, Rick, I think the idea of having this be a highly dense and potentially mixed-use development could actually alleviate a lot of the concerns that we have about connectivity. Like, I could imagine a place where people live in an area, go downstairs to the cafe to do work. Everybody's working from home now. And then to go to a restaurant, they could just go walk or bike down the street where they have a new restaurant open, right? So, and all of that in a very accessible, very close area. And so, not to take away from our current downtown, but I could see a lot of potential for a thriving, strong community right off of Exit 75 area.
It seems to me the point was also made to have a recognition for a regional kind of employment area. There are more and more folks who, when there are two people and two incomes heading in opposite directions, they have to have a discussion about, why don't we find someplace sort of in between so neither one of us has to have the biggest commute every day? And I think that's a reality. People can move down towards a greater Portland area or move up to Augusta area. And so I think if we have a place where people could find a location where they could meet that need in their family, we would attract some of those folks to be here. So seems to me that's a sort of another kind of characteristic that's a reality of where the economy is today. And being near the Turnpike is a convenient place because you can just jump off there. You can either go north or south and not have too huge a commute. As I've been commuting to Portland to babysit my grandchildren, I can certainly see the commute going south during early morning and coming back at night. And you better have your gloves on because they're going 85 miles an hour.
Say that it also gives you the opportunity for people to decide they're going to work here. I have friends who bought a place in Topsom because one worked in Augusta and the other worked in Portland. guess what? One works in Brunswick now, and the other works in Bath, because they get sick of commuting. And I think that is a common, you have people that decide to do that.
John, I think one thing that we have to think about too is, and I like the fact that we've identified these three areas, and I would call them 3 districts. And then we really need to work on, as a city, we lack the ability to really define and identify areas. Just sitting around here, people use 3 or 4 different terms to describe this area, or names rather, describe this area. So I think as part of our plan, we've identified this, we need to name it.
Yeah.
And that needs to be then branded, and then we can start working through economic development to identify, this is the district that we're looking at, whether it's the Great Falls district, probably not the Mall district, but that area also needs to have a good branding name. I think that's one thing that we hear from the public as well, is they don't even know how to identify their neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but we can begin that by looking at these areas and saying, okay, what are we going to call this district, and what do we want? Based on what we see that we want there, then we can create the name.
That's a great point, Phil. You are right. And I notice in other metropolitan areas, they have names for their neighborhood, and people are pretty loyal to their neighborhood. So I think that's an excellent point. And then it doesn't seem as such you're just part of a huge, big thing. You're part of a neighborhood that interacts with each other where you live. Kelly?
I also I love that idea, and as someone who lives in this area, am a lot of what I'm hearing described in the room, because I do go to Portland often. And one of the things I think is, by naming a district like that, it still extends that you're a part of Auburn. You're just a certain part of Auburn, as opposed to that being removed. One of the areas that I wonder what we'll hear for public comment is around the East Hardscrabble area. I hear a lot around just transportation in general, the traffic in that area, that being a cut-through area. So I'll be interested to see kind of what public comment comes back of those areas just right around there.
Yeah. And, there has been historically some names like that, Phil. I mean, we have the Danville area, West Auburn, North Auburn, New Auburn. So it's, I think, a natural human tendency to have a name for your neighborhood. And we should probably continue to move that on by branding it. Do you want to go up and take a look at the mall area and see what that area boundaries look like?
John, one area on this that I was wondering, I'm sorry, you went to the mall. I thought you went to Great Falls next. I'll wait to Great Falls, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to get to Great Falls, too. So, yeah, you can see things like, the Auburn Mall are in there, Mount Auburn Avenue area is in that. The Shaw's Mall area is there, the Marriott Hotel, I think, is in there. Taylor?
Yeah, the one thing that I wanted to point out is that on the north side of that zone, there's the old Evergreen Subaru dealership that's just outside of it, and I don't know if there's anything planned there right now, but that could be a real high potential for development at some point.
Oh, yeah, the old one, yeah.
That's the lot that Ally's pointing at?
Yep. Well, it's just on the other side. Yep, you went too far. Right there.
Right there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, just cut this off at the road when we did that. So it'd be good to get input about if the line's drawn in the right place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just in the same vein, if you go up where Grace Lawn goes into Turner, there's already some high-density units there that are actually excluded. It's in that little purple bit right there.
Oh, yeah.
Complex. Across from St. Mary's.
Yep.
Yeah, that's over by the Masonic Temple and
Right,
St.
yeah,
Mary's, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't remember how many units are in there, but it's a good number.
Is that the Grace Lawn Apartments or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are at least 12 unit
12 per
buildings,
unit.
and there's 4 of them.
Yeah, 12 per unit.
Yeah.
And then there's that medical facility right across the street. So it seems like it fits in less with the cemetery and more with the red area, similar to the way the Evergreen Subaru does.
Yeah. Yeah, is that pleasure of the committee? Do that? Good, okay. As well as the other area, I think that Dana brought up as well. Yep. Yeah.
We'll draw the line along the street here and then just down and around.
I think I see the committee's in favor of both those changes.
Dana did.
Yep. Yeah, I think there seems to be consensus. We'll add that as well. Yep. Anything else in this area? Any other boundary tweaks?
Just to go back to that, so that's no longer a street, but it still seems it's no longer considered a city street, but it's probably still a good boundary, even though that other parcel across could be tied in, but I think it's still a good boundary line anyway for us.
Okay. Anything else before we move to the Great Falls? Okay, well, let's move down to Great Falls, take a look at those boundaries.
John, my only question here was, with the uncertainty regarding county jail, YMCA, and the Auburn novelty, there could be some potential there on that Turner Street, maybe to at least go to that opposite side of Turner Street, at least before you get to Pleasant. So you could pick up the triangle. No, I'm sorry, Ally, yep, the other way. So the triangle, YMCA.
Yeah. Where the courthouse,
Yes.
courthouse, jail, Court Street Baptist Church,
Yeah.
YMCA,
Yeah.
that whole triangle.
Yeah, that's, those uses, I think, are in transition.
Yeah, so definitely using Pleasant Street maybe as the boundary.
The group feel comfortable with changing that line? Okay.
If we're doing that, that's going to come up Pleasant and Turner. Should it extend all the way up to Hampshire and Union Street? Because we're going to have right there. Because if we include the triangle from Pleasant Street, it'll come down Pleasant to Court, down to Turner, and then it's going to be sticking up in there. So it would seem if we're going to do that, that area north of Hampshire Street should also be in the red.
That sound good to folks? Yeah, seems like that's a consensus. Milano?
Yeah, so I'm just looking to see where this line's going. So is this going to include everything to To the right of that blue line?
Everything
Okay.
to the north.
North and to the east, okay, yeah. So I had two suggestions. One, I'd defer to our in-house librarian. I don't know if it would be a benefit to include the area right around the library, not including the library, but just to the north of it, those lots on Spring Street, yeah.
Down Union Street.
Down Union Street.
It'd be Union and down Library Ave.
That's right.
So that, in effect, where the yellow ends to the brown, you'd fill that in right where your green line ends there now.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll defer to Rick on that. And then the second one was down Webster. So if you're looking where Webster intersects with Union, there is a major development out there right now, which was the old Webster School. So I would potentially include Webster School and then the lots that come down to Union Street. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, from there. Yeah, exactly.
What's the tan zone there, Ally, now?
That's the mixed-use neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to cross to the other side of Union Street with
Yeah,
this. Because that's already going to allow some pretty good density in what's in the mustard color there now.
Yeah.
Is all of this land, is it all currently T61? Is that what the zoning is?
That area, part of it's T6, I think the other must be 5, 1, or 2
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah, yeah, that goes up to, yeah.
I think Phil's point was just this potential for redevelopment just above or west of Great Falls Plaza. And I think it's ripe for that. There's buildings that, aren't necessarily in great condition that could be either repurposed or replaced. And it's the kind of area where you want density and might attract developers. We lost a Ice Bakery was there, that's gone. There's empty lots here and there and buildings that are marginal, so having it expand a little isn't a bad idea.
What's the feeling about expanding it a little bit in that direction?
I'm not clear. You mean across Union Street? Because I think
Oh, is that already?
I think what we were talking about already was all the way down to Hampshire.
Yeah, I'd go to Hampshire and Union Street, just sort of fill in that triangle, and I think I'd leave it at that. And the other thing is we got to deal with Union Street just getting better access across it. It's just difficult for people navigating that. It's like the Franklin Arterial of Auburn, same kind of, like highway construction in the middle of a downtown.
You like it the way that is, Rick?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Everybody seems to be in agreement with that? Okay. Anything else about land use categories to discuss this evening before we move into looking at the proposed schedule for public input? Dana?
Yeah, so just reading through the description of the land use for the high density core, I don't know how strongly we can encourage this, but anything in the high density core, I'd like to see residential on top of commercial, or residential on top of some other use. And it talks a little bit about it, but I mean, strongly encouraged, I don't know what wording I would put there, but I think that would be the type of development that would be the most desirable there.
Yeah, I agree with Dana's thought. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that the preference there is that at least the first floor is mixed use, commercial, retail. I don't think we want to say the upper floors have to be residential. If someone, we've got an office building in Great Falls Plaza now, but, the idea here is to give developers the opportunity to build up, right? So I was at the Merida conference and I was talking to a couple developers, and the reality for them is that you can, you hit an elevator, as someone pointed out earlier, at the 4th floor, and you can get to maybe the 5th, and if they stretch it to the 6th, after that you're into structural steel. There's no 7, 8, 9-story buildings. There's no business case for that anymore. So, once they pass 5 or 6 stories, they want to be 10 or 12 stories, right? To make the numbers work to build it. So we want to leave flexibility here, but I do agree we want to try to drive the first floor so that we have the amenities Belial was talking about at exit 75. Someone can go downstairs and there they are.
Yeah.
And I think the reading that I'm doing right now is saying that a lot of the most popular type of development in these types of places is what they call the 5/1, which is 6-story building, 1 floor of some use, and then 5 residential. So I don't know if that's necessarily needs to go in there, but it seems to me that at least we'd be doing a disservice not to allow up to 6 stories here.
So updated the language to kind of prefer that uses are mixed with active ground floor commercial and upper floors residential. Is this an area where the committee would like to add in building height, or talk a little bit more about kind of encouraging form and density instead of upper limit on building height?
It's almost like you want to set a minimum. I mean, if you're going to develop in this area, you can't say it has to be more than 1 story, but it seems like it should be.
I think you should say that. I mean, I gave the example before, what happened on Lisbon Street, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So if you want to drive high density in here,
Yeah.
I think we really should talk about the form and the very close relationship with the public and private realm. I think there should be minimum densities here. If there's residential in the structure, minimum density, I don't know if, I don't think you want to let people build 2, 3-story buildings in here because it's a wasted opportunity. So I don't know what the minimum is. I don't think you should have any upper in this because we're capped every place else in the city. So if you want, these are the places that would give the opportunity to build up if there was a business case for
that. Rick?
I think I'd do 4 as a minimum, and then you could go higher. I mean, there was controversy about Great Falls Plaza, 2 Great Falls Plaza. What is that, 7 stories, I think? And people are used to it now, and I could see a 10-story fitting in down there very nicely without any issue.
John? Currently, it's minimum of 4 and maximum of 8 in that T6 area. Not all of it's T6, but
Yeah, you're talking about the T6 zone right at Great Falls.
that's a small portion of that bigger area, but it would just be expanded out if it were to continue with that.
So I think that's Dana's point. I agree with that. We should have something, whatever it's going to be. It should be at least 4.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should have an upper limit. I know we make the fire chief nervous when we start talking about this, but, you know, it's, you need to allow that opportunity for developers if you want to grow density in the downtown and if you want to avoid sprawl.
So how would you word that? Minimum of 4 stories? I mean, I don't know, encourage.
The other thing you want to think about, Paul mentioned this earlier, remind me, that the elevator, is that city code or is that NFPA? Because that's the threshold, right? You want to make sure that whatever we're doing here, your minimum threshold requires an elevator, because that's the thing that really depresses not crossed on that threshold.
Some of that's ADA requirements, so it's even higher up than that.
Yeah, so we should, I guess, figure that out and make sure that our minimum required number of stories at least is in the elevator world.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree with anything here. I think this all makes sense. I just wonder if it's too aspirational, right? So when was the last time we saw a building built besides 186 Maine? It just seems like, I don't know if building height is a contributor to one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot of development in the downtown in some of the available spaces. I don't know, I'm just talking out loud here. I'd like to see all the 4-story buildings we can get, but I just wonder if there's an impediment there to development because it's too costly to build those buildings. I don't know.
Well, maybe it depends on what your development idea is.
It's really the market, you know, there's no market for office space right now, so you're not seeing that. That's been the holdup with Bates number 5. They just can't find enough tenants to make it fly. And, you know, you probably won't see another 2 Great Falls Plaza, but somebody might do like the construction company from Westbrook that did the property on Main Street, then just decide they want to do infill. You know, maybe it's across the street on Main Street, maybe it's Great Falls Plaza. Great Falls Construction.
We also got to remember that we're going to have this for 10 to 15 years down the road. So what we want to do is create the opportunity. I don't think if we change this, there's going to be 5 people running in here tomorrow saying they want to build 20-story buildings. But that may happen down the road as we have the increased demand for housing and people looking for mixed use and they're looking for more dense neighborhoods.
Oh,
Well,
Becky.
I would just connect it back to what Phil said earlier. I mean, if this is a trajectory of tools that Auburn has in its toolbox, the marketing of this has to mean we have to say, we have a vision for this part of our community to look like this, and we're open for anyone and anyone to come and bring us ideas. I don't think randomly driving through there right now, a developer would get that sense. So I'm all for these land use descriptions. I mean, this one's really much more detailed than the other ones. So I think if we can be consistent with as much granular detail as is appropriate, it paints a picture for folks to see what this plan actually looks like in the future.
Well, maybe that's certainly part of the way of driving it is describe what you'd like to see. Any other discussion about these this high growth area before we move on to public input? No? Okay, let's move on to the public input section.
In your packets have an outline for community engagement approach. The locations and dates in there, I haven't confirmed yet with Lauren. Those were kind of what have been penciled in, and when she gets back, we can work with the committee to confirm dates, locations, and times for those, but generally looking at April 7th, 8th, 13th, and 15th as of right now for different locations and dates for in-person activities, and then also having opportunities similar to what we did over the last summer, recreating all of these in the same way online so that folks can participate in a variety of ways. And as we were thinking about an approach for engagement and the discussions that we've had here over the past few months, want to try to create something that is as easy to participate in as possible and doesn't require kind of a technical barrier to entry. This committee has done a lot of work on the technical side to kind of build out logic and all of that for growth area boundaries and other land use categories. So as we're thinking about ways to engage the public, want to create these opportunities and activities where people can provide input in a way that's easy and that they understand. So looking at kind of visuals, broad vision for these different areas. What do I want to see there? What do I want that to look like and feel like? And really reduce the barrier to entry that we have to participate in some of these discussions. So have proposed some open house style events, looking at kind of what types of development belong here. So visual preference activities showing a variety of different uses or different visuals for kind of what that land use category is describing. Folks can kind of put stickers or select what they like and what they want to see that area look like to help further refine descriptions. And then opportunities for comments too, if there's disagreement on kind of what that vision for a certain area looks like, and other opportunities there. And then to help kind of refine cores and priority investment areas, activities to look at kind of where the most amount of growth should occur, what areas are most appropriate for change and for growth, and then looking at kind of broader concerns. So what concerns you the most about kind of recent or future developments, and then asking the community to kind of reflect on their vision for the future, kind of where do you want to live, what do you want to see more of in the future, and using these activities to really help kind of make boundary decisions more granular, and then also refine kind of descriptions and visions for land use categories in a way that is informed by kind of community vision and desire for these different areas over the future.
And I note in looking at some of your notes here in the presentations, you know, it is important to inform the public what new state law is requiring and how that affects these decisions. So I think that's good to have it in there. And I think the format where the group all get a presentation and opportunity to have a bigger overview, and then an opportunity to look more closely, granular, maybe at their neighborhoods probably. Are we looking right for their houses, where they are?
Want to make sure that the community is aware of some of the changes and some of the things that are impacting these growth decisions, but don't want people's ability to participate and provide input on this be contingent on understanding of density and infrastructure impacts and things like that. Don't want to make this an intimidating activity. I know that we've spent a lot of time talking about this over the past few months, and we'll be asking the community to provide input on this outside of kind of this formal setting. So I want to make sure that they have the ability and context to be able to provide input in a meaningful way.
I'm wondering what your thoughts might be. I know that you have these tentatively thinking of evening meetings, 5 to 7. I'm wondering if something like a Saturday meeting, maybe a Saturday afternoon or something. People have a lot of different schedules, so. Yeah.
I think that would be good. I would also avoid Mondays in April. We don't have them scheduled yet, but one would have to be a very optimistic person to think that the budget's going to be resolved by the 6th of April.
What do you mean?
Phil's hoping, but there's likely to be budget workshops, and I don't think we want to have the competing at the same time. And I agree, some type of a weekend thing during the day, because it gives people on off hours ability to attend.
And Lauren's back. I can work with her on timing
Yeah.
and facility capacity and availability to do something on a weekend or at an alternative time. And we can talk with her. I check in with her and John on Friday, so we can talk about kind of avoiding Mondays in April as well.
Yep. Hold on.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just make it a point to have this committee make a concerted effort to include voices that haven't traditionally been at the table. Not to say that they haven't already, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge that the decisions that we're making with these future land use maps include people that speak English and people that don't necessarily speak English, right? And so it's important to have them at the table and engage them where they are. Obviously, the current climate is not conducive to that, and so it's a little bit of building that trust. And I think what the staff has done with the elementary schools is an excellent idea, because that's a welcoming setting. People are familiar with that. And I would add a suggestion to include one elementary school, actually the one that I went to, Washburn Elementary School, which is right in that nook of a community of, non-English speaking, and as well as the New Mainer community, which is a walking distance of that school. So I think that would be an excellent addition to sort of make it more accessible for them to attend that kind of meeting. And so, yeah, I just want to put that out there to make the committee more aware of the engagement that we're doing and actively trying to do within the entire city.
Yeah, that's a good point. Lauren has done a pretty good job and has quite a inventory of different organizations, people, where she can send emails out to them, remind them of some of those different organizations, reached out to people who generally may not come to those kinds of meetings. So, point well taken, and I think we'll continue in that line of reaching out as much as we can. At least we can make the invitation. We can't make them come, but we can invite them come and wish they would come.
John? I would just follow up on that. I think we can all bring some folks too, and that'll help. We can bring folks we know. I just had a question on number 3 on your proposed, or just clarify for me what the presentation materials will be. Will they be where we are now, or are they reacting to the work we've done?
Yes.
So is the question, where should growth occur, the right way to ask the question? If we're presenting some, let's say exit 675 is a designated growth area. Do we want to say, more like, how do you react to this growth area? Are we really asking them where the growth should occur, I guess, is my question. Because they told us that last summer, I think. And we'll get a lot of the same people, I think.
I think we can certainly update that, looking at that again now, Becky. I think that makes sense. I think we can show growth area map, and then maybe within those areas, what is the most appropriate for kind of highest density, highest amounts of growth, kind of what areas are community members the most comfortable seeing change the most within this area, and then kind of where is there some concern or trepidation around growth within certain areas.
Other thoughts or suggestions regarding the public presentation? I think the goal here is we'll have the future land use map, which people can react to. We'll have the land use categories, which people can react to. And I think those are 2 big pieces that we want input from. And this sets us up so that meeting fourth Tuesday, in April, we can have that feedback at our meeting and consider it. And we may be coming back with the policies and actions updates from there. We're finishing those up now.
Yeah, noticing that these are all, at least on this draft schedule, scheduled to occur before our next comp plan committee meeting. Are there things that you want us to do as members at these things, or what should we be looking to prepare for?
I think if the committee is able to obviously help kind of share that these are happening in person, online activities, if committee is able to attend, I think the community hearing from all of you who have really helped kind of form and make these decisions to be able to talk about maybe why some of these decisions were made. I'm looking at this map, what does this mean? Be able to kind of help answer and be that kind of community voice and face in the room if you're able to attend those meetings. I think that would be great. Similar to the open houses that we had over the summer. I think having you all there to be able to kind of share and talk about this process would be great. Friendlier face than myself and the rest of our team.
Yeah.
Just an observation in this. I know Ally has in 1B, what are the growth areas, land use categories. To me, this is the most important piece of this, because this is not an easy concept for people to get their heads around that haven't been involved in this. And what we get for feedback is going to be completely dependent when we put those maps up there, as people have at least a reasonable understanding of what we're talking about. So that to me is going to be the difficult part of this.
And we're planning to have a lot of information available, either as flyers, information in person, and then similar to the story maps and other things that we've kind of viewed and talked about here, being able to break down some of the density and have some visuals there. What does this actually look like in kind of real life, and have as much information as possible to help folks kind of understand the purpose and the intent of what we're doing here.
Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to follow up with what Becky and Jeff said, and you too, Ally, is like, we've had some fairly technical discussions about where the lines are drawn here, and it wasn't trivial to get where we are. So I think it's important at that meeting to be able to convey to people that there's been a lot of work, and sticky notes sometimes it gets prefaced with there are no stupid questions, just put them down there. This is a little bit different than that, and so we have to be careful about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the more they understand sort of what the input was to developing this, helps them.
People are easily able to respond to visuals. If I like what that looks like, I can visualize this here in the future, and not asking them, what density do you think is appropriate in this part? Because that gets very technical very quickly. And
Right.
the community, I'm assuming not everyone is a zoning expert. We want people to be able to say, I like what that looks like. I want to see that here in the future, and get feedback that gives us more input and lower barrier entry to somebody who has to be a zoning expert or an expert on state law to be able to participate.
Yeah, and of course, as we've been doing all along, want to remind folks this is not zoning. So this is not a zoning map they're looking at. That comes later. Any other input, suggestions, comments on the public session? And, I hope we get good turnout for them. I hope they will help inform our work as we go on. With this and with the policies and actions coming in at the end of the month, we'll work on in May as well, and there's other sections of the comp plan to look at like. I'm going to try to move forward as aggressively as we can. Try to, I'm being an optimist too, try to get it done this summer rather than in the fall. But rather be optimistic and give up a month later rather than to be pessimistic and still be here in January. Hello?
Just to circle back with the discussion about sharing and information for the events, for public engagement events, if we could get access to like flyers and stuff to share, I'll make sure the WhatsApp aunties are tapped in.
Oh, yeah, that would be
Thank
good
you.
if you could help with
100%.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we'll be building out the survey on Social Pinpoint, which does have a translate functionality, at least for the survey pieces. We're going to work to see what that actually looks like translating state law and legislation, but we'll at least have kind of surveys available to be translated into a few different languages.
Anything further this evening? Yeah?
Yeah, just one more thing. So, once all these things happen, to me, it sounds like the next meeting we'll have to take the information and act on it one way or the other, or at least have a readout of some sort. So it sounds like there's action to be followed after these types of meetings. Okay.
Yes.
Yep, so the hope would be that we're able to compile everything ahead of the April meeting, and at that time, can pull this back up and say, yes, community feedback confirmed that this is correct, we have this part right, or this feedback warrants some additional discussion around these areas. Let's spend some time kind of finalizing and refining this based on community feedback.
Are we ready for an adjournment? Or is there more? I think I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all those in favor? Thank you very much for your time and useful input.
John, let the record show when you schedule a meeting for 3 hours, they last less than 2 hours.